class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and this will be another weekly recap, this time of week 19. So the Sharks started off this week on a Monday playing the final game of their 4-game road trip. This was against the Vancouver Canucks, and they were looking to go 4-0 on this road trip for only the 4th time in NHL history that a team would go 4-0 in a road trip that brought them to Vancouver, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Edmonton. And the Sharks faced off against Mikey DiPietro, a 19-year-old goaltender normally in the OHL for the Ottawa 67s, who was playing in his first NHL game due to some injuries to the Canucks goaltending. And the Sharks certainly had no mercy on him as he led in 3 goals on the first 5 shots, and the Sharks ended up winning that one 7-2. Sharks then returned home as they faced off in their second and final matchup against the former Stanley Cup champions Washington Capitals, and the Sharks at this point were bringing a 6-game winning streak into this game, but the Sharks were pretty outplayed. It seemed as though the Capitals wanted that game more. The Capitals were in the first game of their California road trip, and they took it to the Sharks with a 5-1 victory. The Sharks finished off the week again against the Vancouver Canucks, this time in San Jose, however, and with Jacob Markstrom, their actual starting goaltender, in nets, and so this game ended up being a lot closer, but the Sharks still managed to pull out the victory 3-2 as they ended the week tied for first place in the Pacific Division with 77 points, if I'm not mistaken. On to the offense of the week. It was not super high end, as the Sharks, of course, only did get 1 goal against the Capitals, but they did get 7 against the Canucks. Pavelski led the way with 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points, as he got up to over 30 goals this week, now at 31, as well as over 50 points with 52. Logan Couture with 1 goal and 3 assists put his point total up to 53, as he also passed 50 points. Evander Kane, 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points, as he also reached the 50-point mark. And then Timo Meier with 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points, who also passed the 50-point mark. Brent Burns, the only player who didn't pass the 50-point mark, as he instead just put up 3 assists to get up to 64 points with 3 points on the week. So the first thing to talk about in terms of news is Erik Karlsson. He did finally return from his injury against the Vancouver Canucks, the second game against the Canucks of this week, so the final game of the week. It seemed like he might return for the game against the Washington Capitals, but he ended up being held out again here, precautionary region, very cautious. But I think once the Sharks did lose that game to the Capitals, I'm not sure if Karlsson was 100% ready still. I'm sure the Sharks could have gone another day of waiting, as Karlsson did not look 100%, although he still looked very good, factored in on 2 of the Sharks' goals and a very nice plays in both parts. But again, he didn't look like the normal Erik Karlsson, so I'm sure the Sharks could have potentially held him out of the lineup longer. But at this point, he had had a month of rest. You want to get him back up to game speed as the Sharks come out to the final quarter of this season. And so Erik Karlsson did return and did have a good effect, and we'll see how his game improved as time goes on. Next is the Sharks offense. So as I said, 4 players here for the San Jose Sharks reaching or surpassing the 50-point mark. They are now the only team in the NHL who have 6 players at 50 points or more, as of course Hurdle joins these 5 players who I already have listed. And the only other teams in the league that even have 5 are the Calgary Flames and the Pittsburgh Penguins, whose 6th player, who is further back, has something like 30 points. Meanwhile, the Sharks' 7th player, who's coming up to 50 points, would be Erik Karlsson at 44, who very well could have hit the 50-point mark if he didn't get injured. And so the Sharks are definitely getting some nice balanced offense this season. Nobody's super high in terms of points. Brent Burns at 64 is respectable. And of course, if you look at a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are running with Nikita Kucherov at like 94, or even the Calgary Flames, who I mentioned have 5 50-point scores, they have Goodrow, I think, at 78. And so it's more of an offense by committee, and it has been working out for the San Jose Sharks. Of course, they, as I said, are tied for first place in the Pacific Division, and by default tied for first place in the Western Conference, as well as second place in the league, only behind the Tampa Bay Lightning. Final thing to talk about is that by this time next week, the trade deadline would have happened and passed by the San Jose Sharks. It will be very interesting to see if they decide to make a move, and if they do, what move it will be. Will they acquire a depth forward? Will they get more of some middle to top 6 scoring? Will they go big or go home by trying to pick up one of the top stars like a Duchesne or a Mark Stone at the trade deadline? Or will the Sharks just stand pat here and hope that their team that they currently have is good enough to make a push for the Stanley Cup. Doug Wilson certainly has a lot of choices to make coming up in this final week before the deadline. It'll be very interesting to see what he decides to do. Class dismissed.